Okay, we are recording. I'm going to share the screen with the sheets that I sent out. Did everybody get the sheet? Do you want me to share the screen or no? Or does everybody have it?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yes, please share.
So I will share. And look at that. There we go. Okay, so you see this sheet? Everybody sees my beautiful
Yes.
sheet? Okay.
Yes.
So we're gonna kind of like pick up where we left off last time, and there's a lot to say here. When we looked at Yaakov runs away, we discussed last week, which the more I think about it, the more I read into it, and we had a lot of conversation over Shabbos, which Dina actually mentioned that she has that the family, they discuss it over Shabbos, which is very nice. And at the Shabbos table, these Friday nights are I'm not going to say endless, they're just long. And to have something to talk about is very nice. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to get the participants screen off. There's a lot of windows going on here. So, okay. Now, Yaakov has to run away. And he goes to, and we know the story in this week's parsha, he meets Lavan for the first time. And that's like a box of fun for him, as you can imagine. And just move this window over. And he has to deal with Lavan first time that he ever knows how to deal with him, whatever that is. Okay. So we're going to look first at the first thing. If you have the Chumash handy, which we should hopefully have handy. Let's look at page 148. 148. Okay. And everybody, you want to meet a girl in the Bible, where do you go?
The well?
That's right.
To the well.
That's why everything's all well and good. But today it would be the equivalent if you go to, I guess, a bar, right? A watering hole. I don't know. You remember the old days when a boy could just meet a girl, and they have to go through all these like hoops and everything. Like they were safe spaces where boys and girls could meet. Now it's like all these arrangements. I don't know. Anyway, he goes and the whole thing with the well and the shepherds. So look at pasuk Tes 9, the middle of page 148. Again, we're chapter 29, verse 9. If anybody is a stickler for grammar, there's a big difference between whether you say ba'a or ba'a. Rashi points it out here in a couple other places. So he's still speaking with the shepherds. Rachel had arrived with her father's flock because she was a shepherdess. Okay, that's a word we don't get to use that often, a shepherdess. Vayihi Ka'asher ra'o Yaakov es Rachel bas Lavan achi imo ves tzon Lavan achi imo ve'yigash Yaakov ve'yagal seven me'al pia be'er ve'yashkes tzon Lavan achi imo. This is a bizarre pasuk. When it was that Yaakov saw Rachel, the daughter of Lavan, his mother's brother, and the flock of Lavan, his mother's brother. Jacob came forward and rolled the stone off the mouth of the well and watered the sheep of Lavan, his mother's brother. Do you think he was related to Lavan or no? He may or may not have been his mother's brother. Okay, 3 times in the verse. I don't want to focus on that. Now, look at this. He's so forward, this Yankel. He's got a lot of issues, okay? Vayishak Yaakov l'Rachel vayisa es kalo vayevk. Don't try this on a first date. He kissed her, and then he cried. Can somebody explain that to me? What? First of all, who kisses on the first date like that? Like they didn't even go on a date yet. You're just sort of like meeting, right? And like what happened here? And why did he cry?
He's just happy to see someone from the family.
Oh, this is a happy cry.
No,
It's a happy cry.
he knew they wouldn't be buried together.
Oh, so you're cheating already. Reading the sources.
Nope, I knew that from last year. You taught that.
I know that's what happens when you don't go to senior cut day. You learn stuff. And you remember. So, no, so first of all, I know everybody here. Well, I'm very positive, as you know. I love a positive attitude, positive outlook. The only problem is that the pasuk says, "Vayisa es kolo vayevk." He raised his voice and cried. Raising the voice, what does that usually connote? Like a wailing,
Yeah.
like exasperation of some sort. We're going to come back to this, rest assured. Look at Rashi, which I have here. This is number 1 on the sheet here, okay? So look on the sheet here, Rashi. Lefi, again, this is where we continued last week. It's Rabbi Foreman. It's phenomenal in the book, and I'm just going to adapt some of what he writes. Lefi shitzafa beruach hakodesh she'enu nichneses imo likavura. So he sees that Rashi gives the first opinion. Like he doesn't know her. They haven't gone on a date. They haven't had their first fight yet.
Had they even like met really?
No, this is the first time that he's seeing her.
Like his children, if they're related, but they never had. Did they ever meet before?
No, not to my knowledge. They never met. Right? This is saw you at Sinai. They've never encountered one another. And he kisses her and he cries. And Rashi says the first reason because he sees right away, he has a vision that they're not going to be buried together. Now, I've heard all those great stories where someone said they met their wife for the first time and he said to his friends, I'm going to marry that woman. As sure as I'm standing here right now, I'm going to marry that woman. Okay? That did not happen to me. Although my wife and I, we had a very, very short courtship. We met on September 13th. We were married on January 15th. We were engaged November 5th, all in the same year. So it was like almost 4 months to the day that we met. It's wonderful. Well, I gotta say when you know, but you know what? She was in college and the break and like it just worked out that way. I suppose if my kids came home and did that, I'd kill them. Or I'd say, great, go to Vegas and elope. The different approaches to this. So, he didn't just say, I'm going to marry her. He's like, I know I'm going to marry her, but I'm not even going to be buried with her. So he cries. Rashi continues, Davar acher. Okay. I have to let someone in. Okay. Nancy's in. Davar acher. What's another opinion? Lefi sheba biadayim reikanios. Because he came empty-handed. By the way, that's the worst thing. You never go somewhere empty-handed, right? You know that there's a great joke. You could use it on Thanksgiving when you don't invite your family over because you're gonna get in trouble for inviting your family over. Is that like the grandmother calls the grandson and says like, you're gonna come visit me finally, and he says yes. He says, tell me exactly how to go. I haven't been to your apartment before. He's like, okay. So she says, you go to the you go to the street and then with your elbow hit the buzzer and I'll let you in. And then when you come in with your elbow hit button 2, and then I'll let you in. Go in the elevator and with your elbow hit the 3rd floor and I'll let you in. And he's like, yeah, grandma. He's like, what do I need to use my elbow? He's like, what? You're coming empty-handed? Right. He's worried. He's upset that, oh my God, I have nothing to show for it. So what does that mean? And here we have the famous Eliphaz story, and you can make of it what you want. We're going to make something of this. Omar Eliezer Evet Avi Abu Habiyadan Nizam McDonald's Fani Yadi Klum. You remember the story in last week's parsha, 2 weeks ago, in Toldos and Chayesara, when Eliezer went to find Rivka, he comes laden with stuff. He's got goodies, he's got prizes, he's got trinkets, he has jewelry. I mean, he's wowing this family like, look what I have, and I have nothing. So ask yourself the question, why do you have nothing, Yaakov? Why could you take something? He says, no. Esav hears that Yaakov ran away and Esav wanted to kill him. So he's, I guess Esav had some things to do. So he sent Eliphaz, or maybe he sent a bunch of people in different directions. And Eliphaz is the son of Esav. Eliphaz went and caught up with Yaakov. And he caught him. So now he has to kill him. His father commanded him, if you see your uncle Yaakov, you have to kill him. But Eliphaz had a Yiddish Zayde, right? Yitzchak is his grandfather. He grew up on his lap, which sounds familiar. It's like Lot who was torn because he grew up in Abraham's house. Or you have Menashe and Ephraim, like all these things where people are torn between different influences of their life. It's a good ethical question in and of itself is, who do you listen to? Okay. So because he grew up with Yitzchak and he kind of like was hesitant. Yeah, I don't think I want to do this. So Amalo ma. He's like, what am I supposed to do? My father commanded me that I have to kill you. And I don't want to. It's not the right thing to do. So Yaakov, Amalo Yaakov, Tol ma shebiyadi, take all of my possessions. In other words, he had things. He had stuff to bring with him. Maybe if he would meet a girl. Because after all, that was the commandment from his parents. You have to go marry somebody from my hometown. So he's not going to go empty-handed. He wasn't empty-handed, but he became empty-handed because Eliphaz, he gave it to him. And he said, why would he give him the stuff? He says, because ha'ani chashiv kames. Because we have a principle in halacha that there's certain people who are considered as dead. And if you have no possessions, you're considered like you're dead. So here we go. Here's Yaakov being the best Yaakov that he could be. He's again using some deceitful ploy to say that, okay, you'll be off the hook. If your father asks me, is he dead? Yes, he's dead. He's not dead in the dead sense. He's dead in the I have no money sense. Okay? Now, this is a bizarre Rashi. Can anybody make sense of this Rashi? First of all, what Rashi's giving us this midrashic interpretation about a story with Eliphaz. And he's also telling us that he had Ruach HaKodesh, that they're not going to be buried together. And by the way, one of the stories we know that happens, the Eliphaz story is completely midrashic in its entirety. We don't have, there's no indication of this ever happening. And again, that's how midrash works. Not every story that happens, it's there to teach us something. But why does Rashi also feel the need to give us two different interpretations here?
Is it like the story of Abraham and Lot that they separate because of possessions? So this is.
Well, they hear they didn't separate. He gave it to him. But we will find similarity. I like how you think, Elian. Elian is brilliant. And she always is like spot on. I have to stop. She tells me to stop. She's going to stop. She's going to stop coming here because she's like, the rabbi keeps saying nice things about me. Let's look at the phraseology and something I hinted at earlier in the pasuk. Okay. So look earlier here on the bottom of the page in source number 2. Vatelech vateshiv lo mineged harchei kim tachave keshes ki amaro al ere b'mos hayoled vateshev mineged vatisa es kala vatef. Okay, so remember this? We read this on Rosh Hashanah, which seemed like a million years ago. But when Hagar and Yishmael are banished and they run out of water, so what does she do? She puts the child down a bow shot away and she doesn't want to hear it. This is always the classic, no Jewish mother would ever act this way, would never like put their kid away and hide. We would stay till the very end. And but look at the language, and it's bolded. Conveniently, it's bolded on the sheet. Vatisa es kola vatefk. She raises her voice and she cries. Okay. Now, so what is that? So if I had to ask you, what does that mean when somebody lifts up your voice and cry? Give me word association. What word would you use to describe this?
Prayer.
Say that again.
Prayer.
Prayer. Okay. What else? But what was she praying? She wasn't praying. She didn't pray for him, actually. She gave up on him.
I was going to say despair.
Oh, yes. Despair. That's the word I would use. Right. And I'm not talking about that tire in the trunk. Oh, yeah. Dad, rabbi jokes are like this. It's bad. The notion that everything's lost. The notion that no matter how great it's going to be, and I have this that something is slipping away, something great is slipping away, is despair. So if we can look at the story of Yaakov, and he meets Rachel. So the first part, we know this happens, by the way, that imagine knowing that you have your life mate and you found your partner in life, and there is a certain solace, and people make a very, very big deal about this, about who you next to. Okay. I don't know about you, but especially in families where they have multiple plots and who's where and who's next to whom. And I don't want to be next to that brother-in-law and all these kind of stuff that people I hate to tell you, it doesn't matter, but okay. I don't think you're going to really know at that point, but okay. But a husband and a wife, or they want to be next to each other. So there's a certain solace. But in other words, if you know that you're not going to be next to your beloved, there's a certain like, Batisa Eskalo, I lost out on something. I've missed out on an ultimate goal in life or death. I don't know. So that we can understand, okay? But what about the other part of Rashi? The story of Eliphaz. Okay.
It's almost like he's not satisfied himself with the first answer.
Right. So sometimes we can look at that Rashi's not, that a lot of times when Rashi gives two answers or davar acher, we say like, what didn't he like about the first one? Or sometimes it's meant to just sort of give us a broader lesson, which is I think the thing we're going to go for. Now let's put it this way. What would have happened if he had jewelry, items, wealth, gold, etc. with him when he comes to the well right now and he meets Rachel? Let's play that out. What would have happened? Ostensibly, we could conjecture with a fair amount of accuracy given past history. In other words, what happened when Eliezer came? When Eliezer came, okay.
Rachel would have left with him and he had to work.
Right. Elian's
What'd she say?
correctly stated that what happens in the story afterwards? Lavan takes advantage of him. Oh, you're going to work for Rachel, of course, 7 years, and then he switches her to 20 years he ends up giving him. How many years did Eliezer have to work for Rivka? 0. Why? Because he comes filled with stuff, the eyes light up. Oh, this is someone I can talk to. He speaks my language. The fact now that Yaakov has nothing in his hands, it then leads to a whole series of events where he now has to work for Rachel. And not only that, but he has to go through the humiliation, the degradation of the switching and the this and the that, okay? So remember we ended up last week saying like, what did God think about all this? Did God approve of Yaakov's behavior towards his father or no? In the beginning of our parsha, it seems God says, I'm going to protect you, I'm going to give this, but it's not necessarily the case. It's not necessarily the case that there's no price to be paid. And we have looked at this before. We're going to look at it come at a slightly different angle, okay? And it's the key here is the vatisa es kala vatevk. In between that with Hagar, where it's a feeling of despair, and Yaakov, who has this feeling of, oh, it's slipping away from me. In other words, we're not going to be buried together. Or if only I would have had something in my hands, I wouldn't have to go through everything that's about to happen. Again, looking at this in retrospect, obviously. But in other words, I wouldn't have had to go through the whole ordeal of Rachel, Leah, okay? There's one other instance of this phrase, and it appears a few times in Tanakh, in between the two. And which one is that? Let's look at source number 3. I'm able to do this on the screen. I could like hide it. So it's like dramatic, Vayomer Esav el aviv habaracha achasi lecha avi baracheni gam ani avi vayisa Esav kolo vayevk. When Esav realized that he's been duped and that he does not have what his father was supposed to give him, whatever that was, whatever the blessing was, I don't. Let's assume that it was something big or good or whatever it is. He says to father, "You have no other brachas for me," and his father gives him the consolation prize bracha. You know, when the game show host would escort you off the stage, they do the game show host handshake. You know what that is? You shake them and you hold them by the elbow at the same time and you walk them off the stage. Thank you. We have some lovely parting gifts for you. Thank you for being on our show. Okay, and that's what he had. Oh, we have a blender. You got a blender and a year's subscription to like that magazine that sells steaks, right? Omaha Steaks coupons. Okay, that's what you have. He's like, that's all you have? When he realizes that he didn't get what he was supposed to get, Batisa es kola. I'm sorry, that's the period. Vayisa esav kolo vayevk. He lifts up his voice and he cries again. The sense of despair that he lost out on something. He's really, really missing out on something. Okay, so now as a result of that crying of Esav, everything is now misgalgel. Everything now plays forward, and they're going to connect Esav's crying to Yaakov's crying. As a direct result of Esav's crying, that he raises his voice and cries, it's going to lead to the fact that Yaakov has to raise his voice and cry. Because after all, what happens? Esav, he sends Eliphaz to go get him. Eliphaz is torn. He has, this kind of a moral conundrum. He has a moral dilemma. And Jacob, again, he says to Eliphaz, listen, I'm getting pretty good at this. I deceived my father. Here's what you're going to do. I want you to deceive your father. Take my money. And by the way, there's a price to be paid for that. Even though he lives, he escapes with his life. But what happens as a result? As a result, now he's going to have to work for Lavan. And by the way, it becomes so clear, and this is the one that we cannot ever ignore, is the similarities between the two stories. Is that what does Lavan say to Yaakov after he switches the brides on the night of the wedding? He says, because and again, I'm going to paraphrase a few. He says, I don't know what it's like where you come from, but over here, we don't put the younger one ahead of the older one.
Wow.
Wow.
That's and by the way, Yaakov has no answer because he realized, and the Medrash points it out, it's a big pachin punim, it's a big shtuch. He's saying to him, what do you think you are? You're accusing me of being a deceiver, Yaakov?
Wow.
Yaakov, shall I remind you of where you just came from? And by the way, this whole thing of one who is more desired and supposed to get something versus one who is less desired, who didn't get it, Rachel, Leah, uses the word that she is loved and she is less loved, etc., 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 right? The deceiver, Yaakov, the deceiver, becomes the deceived. That's exactly what happens. And why? Because Vayisa, Esav, Kalo, Vayevk, because Esav raises up his voice in despair. Look what I've lost out on. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying, Yaakov, you're going to experience that same feeling in the sense of Midah Keneged Midah, and you will experience that sense of loss. Now, it doesn't end right there. Now, you know that one of my favorite things to do to compare, and there's books and books and books have written about this, we'll see this over the next couple of weeks, is the comparison of the story of Yaakov and starting now, but more particularly with the story of Yosef, which compares most to the story of Purim. Okay? Now, what's the story of Purim? Let's say the story of Yosef, we'll get to it soon enough, is that you have two individuals who rise to become very powerful people in a powerful government, powerful governmental position, all the while living under an assumed identity. Yosef, nobody knew who really was. Esther, nobody knew who she really was. And the textual comparisons are beyond. There's so many of them. Again, there are many books that have written. I think Jonathan Grossman's book on Esther is phenomenal. If you ever want to sink your teeth into it. By the way, you should now read Erica Brown's book on Esther. Has a lot of this as well, which is really great. So let's look further here, and we're going to see a comparison. This might be the first comparison of those. Okay, and this shows you how this carries on through generations. Kishma Esav es divrei aviv. Vayitzak Saga Gedola Umara Ad Mod Vayamar LaAviv Barcheni Gam Ani Avi. He says it twice, Barcheni Gam Ani. We saw it in the previous pasuk, in the previous source, bless me too. But when Esav heard his father's words, his father says, no, Ba'achicha b'mirma, your brother came and he stole the bracha from you. I don't know what happened. Yitzchak must have been having some difficult days. By the way, this feeling right here, when Esav heard his father's words, Vayitzak tzaka gedola umara ad me'od. Here the translation is, he burst into wild and bitter sobbing. Or we say he screamed a loud and bitter, Mara's bitter, a loud and bitter cry. He let one out like you can't believe. Okay? We have this word like charada gedola. Earlier in the pasuk, it's if you're in the look at if you're in the Chumash, page 138. It's chapter 27, verse 33. And the play on words is really good here because first, when Esav, this is when Esav comes in with his food. And by the way, Yitzchak's already eaten. He's full. He's like taking his post-turkey nap, and he's passed out on the couch or whatever. And he says, "Who are you?" He's like, "What do you mean? I'm Esav. I'm your firstborn Esav." Then it says on Lamed Gimel, "Vayecharad Yitzchak charada gedola ad ma'od." Here, he has this terrible, terrible fear. And then he says, "Who are you?" By the way, you see this? He has a fear charada gedola ad ma'od, and 3 psukim later, 3 lines later, it says he has tzaka gedola mara ad ma'od. As much as Yitzchak trembled. Now, what's the tremble? You ever have that feeling when like let's take it an innocuous thing, okay? Or I'll do it for me. Okay, my biggest fear is sleeping late. Of like waking up and like thinking like on a Shabbos morning, waking up imagine if like I woke up 10 o'clock in the morning on a Shabbos morning, okay? And the feeling when you get up and you look in the clock and you realize like, that's my biggest fear, which is why I wake up 17 times before that to make sure that doesn't happen. Okay, that's just me. I have an aversion to being late. Okay, that's me. If you ever like miss an appointment or did you ever like send an email to the wrong person or whatever it might be, but then you have this pit in your stomach. So if you take that emotion and then you translate that to Esav is tzaka. He lets out a howl, a wild, bitter, like, oh my God, this is bad. So there is only one other instance in the entire Tanakh where such a phrase appears, and here it is in source 5. Umordechai yada es kol asher na'asa, vayikra Mordechai es begadav v'alibash sak v'efer, vayeitzei betoch ha'ir vayizak zi'aka gedala umara. By the way, zi'aka, tz'aka are the same thing. They're linguistically connected. It's the same word. Mordechai learned, he finds out that there's a decree that Haman has passed, and the king approved of it, to destroy the entire Jewish nation. He goes out, he tears his clothes, he puts on sackcloth, he puts on ashes. Has anyone ever seen sackcloth and ashes? I've seen it once in my life, by the way. I was in Israel once. I think it was Shavas or B'Tammuz at the Kotel, and people actually were wearing sackcloth. Interesting. I could never get used to the whole burlappy feeling because I don't even wear wool. Because you ever wonder? By the way, I'm going to share with you a secret. Okay, everybody ever wonder why the rabbi doesn't wear the talis over his head? A lot of people wear the talis ibn cup. I also don't have like the giant thing; it's too heavy. I'm allergic to wool, and I can't put a talis on my head. There's like 2 times a year that I do it. I can't do it. It makes me sneeze and itch and whatever. My lulav and esrog make me sneeze and itch. Go figure. I'm allergic to Judaism, but yet I do it nonetheless. That's why I don't wear my talis over my head, and the silk ones don't stay on. So Mordechai, he hears what goes on, and here vayizak ze'aka gedola umara. He goes, and he lets out a cry like we are done for. Okay, we're going to see the medrash here in a second. Okay, now, so what's the connection here? What's the connection? Who wants to destroy the Jewish people?
Haman.
Haman is from where? Agag. So we can go back to the story of Agag and Shaul, which is the Haftorah that we read in Parshat Zachor, where Shaul is commanded to kill Agag and all the women and children, and he has Rachmanas, and he doesn't do it, and he keeps Agag alive as an example, and he doesn't kill it. And then Shmuel has to come and kill Agag himself. The end of the Haftorah is very, very graphic, and he takes his sword and he slices him to pieces, blah, 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 right? And he's like, and by the way, but what happened as a result is that Agag was able to impregnate a woman before he was killed, and that keeps the line going because we have a commandment to get rid of. Why does he command to get rid of Agag? Because he's from where? Amalek. That's why it's read on Parsha Zachor, and that's why Parsha Zachor is always right before Purim, because Haman is the direct descendant of Agag. Agag is Amaleki, which it says in the Megillah. So we have to get rid of Amalek. Okay, so that's nice. So Amalek wants to kill us. Where does Amalek come from? Look at source number 6. V'simna haisa pilegesh la'alifaz ben Esav, v'ateled la'alifaz es Amalek. Amalek comes from Eliphaz. So what's happening here, again, this is the Gilgul. This is the turning of events. It's the moving over from generation to generation where God says, maybe I didn't say anything negative to you, Yaakov, about what you did. But what you did has ramifications. What you did, because you caused Esav to cry out that great cry, your children will cry out a great cry. Because Esav raised his voice and he wept, you too will raise your voice and weep about what you could have had. And you will suffer the same indignities of being deceived. And you're going to get all self-righteous and they're going to throw it right back in your face and say, what are you're a deceiver. The deceiver became deceived. How does it feel now? How do you like me now? How does it feel when the shoe's on the other foot? Type of thing. And that's the worst kind of mussar, because you'll see that when Lavan says, we don't do that here to put people ahead, the younger ahead of the older, okay? And he says, again, it's the bottom of page 150 and 152. He says, what did you do to me? Hello, I work for Rachel. Why did you deceive me? And then top of page 152. No, we don't do that here to take the younger in front of the older. So what should the answer have been? Yeah, but it's still, I worked for her. You didn't tell me that. Notice how there's no answer? Because there's a certain type of mussar that you get, it's not meant to get an answer. There's nothing you could say. What are you going to say? When you throw that right in your face, there's nothing you can say. So he says, Malay Shivozos, and he does that. And he finishes the time, okay? So, Eliphaz, he deceived his father because Yaakov convinced him to, but it doesn't release him sort of from the obligation, or it hasn't ended that desire. We have a halacha, it says, Esav soneas Yaakov. Well, the Gemara says it's a halacha. Esav wants to destroy Yaakov. That's the root of anti-Semitism, whatever you want to call it, okay? Or family fights. Esav wants to get rid of Yaakov, and he says, just because Eliphaz didn't do it, it doesn't mean that it's not going to happen. What happens is, generations later, the descendants of Eliphaz, Amalek, take it out on Bnei Yisrael at the Yam Suf right afterwards. And then we have the story of Shaul and Agag. And by the way, it seems a very bizarre halacha that we're told that when they go into the land of Israel, they had to do three things, one of which was to destroy Amalek. If anybody ever tells you that the Jewish people are a nice, peace-loving, docile, nation that we have our head in the book all the time, they're lying. Just read the Navi. It's full of blood and guts and mayhem. It's like Game of Thrones on steroids. I mean, by the way, I've never seen Game of Thrones, not a single episode, full disclosure, but from what I've read. And it's not something I should see. And if I did see it, it's not something I should admit that I ever see. That's the whole other thing. By the way, another great movie. Every week the Queen's Gambit has broken the record for the recommendations on Netflix for viewership. If you haven't seen it, see it. And then when you watch it, look at the fixture in the main shul, the light fixture, and tell me what it has to do with the Queen's Gambit. But there's this new movie that we watched, the Sophia Loren movie. Did you see it?
I did. I didn't care for it.
I thought it was pretty good. It was very touching. By the way, she still got it. She's like 87 years old or something.
I heard the book is very good.
Okay, but I thought it was very touching, nice, nice little Holocaust movie. It's like the new generation of Holocaust movies. It's like at the end what happened. It's interesting, and it's Italian. It sounds good in Italian, Anyway, I forgot what it's called, but you look it up. Sophia Loren on Netflix. It's a pretty good movie. I thought. Anyway, so here we learn Torah and we get movie recommendations. So Eliphaz has to continue. So where does that come from? So look at this last medrash here. So here we have this medrash. The medrash says, Kishmoa Esav es divrei aviv. Amar Rabbi Chanina, Kol mishu omer shakadosh baruch hu vatron hu yisvatrun b'nei ma'ohi. Anyone who thinks that God just kind of lets things go. Avatra means like, I'm a vatra on it. Like, I'll let it, it's fine. You're good. We're good. I'll let it go. By the way, some people are very good at letting things go, and some people are not good at all at letting things go. Even after you've like made up and we've made nice, they still like, they don't know how to let things go. Okay. He's like, if you think that Kadosh Baruch Hu doesn't let things lets things go, he's like, let you forget all of your insides. In other words, like your whole kishkash shall be turned inside out. Why? Ella ma'arich apei v'gabei delay. Rather, he delays his anger. The gavei, he's going to collect that which is his. Ze'aka achas hizik Yaakov le'esav. Yaakov caused Esav to let out a big scream, Dichsiv, Kishmo Esav es divrei aviv Isaac ze'aka, gedola umara, that he caused him to scream a big scream. By the way, you notice here in the Medrash, it says ze'aka, not ze'aka, because it's the same thing. V'hecha nifalo, and where was it paid back? Now, where did God collect? B'shushan abir shenema vayizak ze'aka gedola umara ad ba'od. So here the Medrash very, very clearly makes the connection that, again, this is part of intertextual study, was that if there's only 2 times and it's not modern because it's from the Medrash, that if there's only 2 times in all of Tanakh where such a phrase is used, obviously they're connected. What's the connection? So the Medrash spells it out for us. God didn't punish Yaakov right away. He didn't let it slide either. He just said, we're going to wait. Let's see how this plays out. And what happens? Yaakov, you caused your brother to cry and scream out like that? By my life, you're going to see your descendants will scream because as a result of them. Yaakov, he raised his voice and wept. Guess what? You're going to raise your voice and weep. And all of these stories are very, very much interconnected, which then leads you to the final question. What's the final question going to be on this then? If HaKadosh Baruch Hu is really getting back to Yaakov what he caused to his brother Esav, then why didn't he let Esav succeed? Or why didn't he let the descendants of Esav succeed? Or the descendants of Eliphaz, or the descendants of Amalek, or the descendants of Agag, or Haman? Why did he not let that? And so we're going to have to see that next time, but that's Vayishlach. Vayishlach is the confrontation now of Esav and Yaakov. But all of this builds. And that's why it's so important to pay attention to the words of the text and to see what's taking place here is that, you cried, and it's not just crying, but it's Vayisa es kala vayev. She raised its despair. And so now if we go back to the original Rashi, now it makes a lot of sense why Rashi gives us this whole spiel, okay? So Rashi, he meets her and he cries, and maybe he's having a realization that, first of all, that's a real loss of saying, you know what? It's bad enough that like I had to work so hard. Maybe the first answer should go first. The second answer should go first. It's bad enough that, I have to go through all this because of what I did and to save my life. And I had to cause another deceit that now I have no possessions. And now because I have no possessions, now I have to work and I have to go through the ringer and all jump through hoops just to get this girl. And after all that, even so, I don't even get to see her live 34 years. I think she's 34 years when she dies, Rachel. And she doesn't get to see the birth of her second son. And all that, and that's also, and he's saying, you know what? He's realizing that there indeed is a price to pay for your actions, justified or not, which we can go back, and again, we'll share the famous Vilna Gaon, which we say every year, multiple times. It's twice in Bereshis, that when Rivka, when Yaakov says to his mother, my father is going to think that I'm deceiving him, as we saw it last week, I'll be like a deceiver. And she says, Alai kilalascha b'ni, which we literally translate to mean, I'll handle it for you. I'll take the brunt of you. Or, as the Vilna Gaon says, no, Alai kilalascha b'ni. Kilalascha b'ni, your curse, my son, you know what it's going to be? It's going to be Alai. What's Alai? You're going to have to deal with Esav. You're going to have to deal with Lavan, Ayin, Lamed, Yud. You're going to have to deal with Yosef. All those tsaros that you have in your life are going to be as a result of what we're about to do, or what, more importantly, we saw last week, what you're about to do, even though that's not what she had in mind. Okay, not conflating the two ideas, but, and by the way, he says later on, after the whole episode with Binyamin and being taken captive, and he says again, Alai hayu kulana. All of this is happening. In other words, it's all happening. You're right. My mother was right. It did happen. Esav, I can't get over that. And Lavan and Yosef, what service? And by the way, Yaakov never had a moment of silence. So we say, Vayeshev Yaakov Be'ersheva, in the beginning part of Vayeshev, and it says, Rashi says, Bikesh Yaakov Leishev B'Shalva. He just wants to let me sit on my rocking chair on my deck and let me smoke a cigar and have a glass of wine and read a good book and leave me alone. And I want to watch the Queen's Gambit. And it's all fine, right? No, God says, you want peace? You're not getting peace. You don't get peace. But maybe that's why Yaakov is Yisrael. All we ever want as a people is just give me some peace. Like, leave me alone. Lazim Lebanon, nothing. And there's never a moment of peace. Okay. So that's here. The continuation. We asked a question last week. Did God approve of his actions? Well, it remains to be seen. But certainly God didn't forget about it. And certainly there was a price to be paid. And it's such an interesting reading. Now, what I would recommend doing further, if you want to take this further, look at the relationship that Yaakov has with his wives, particularly Leah's, which we've focused on this a number of times in the past, the way she names her children, particularly in light of how we saw last week that for Esav, both of them named him, but for Yaakov, only Yaakov named him. Look at who names the sons, okay? And Yaakov's sort of complete absentee father for the first 4 kids, he's gone. And Leah is just trying so hard to get his attention, and that's why she's unloved. But guess what? Yaakov saw himself as unloved. He was the less desirable one. And guess what happened? He ends up with the unloved one. So a lot of these similarities, you have to look at these stories in succession, but in total, and hopefully we see a lot of this coming together. So this is, you have the sheets here. I hope, we have a chat here. What does the chat say? That's the Queen's Gambit was excellent. Yes, Nancy, I did. I agree. I will, again,
Can I ask a
next
quick
time you're in
question?
the shul, watch it and tell me what you think about the fixture in the shul. It's very important. Okay.
Can I ask you a quick question, Rabbi?
Yes, of course.
So is there any tie-in to when they actually reunite Esav and Yaakov? And again, there's a crying and a shoulder and all of that. And it doesn't have that word Saga or anything like that, but there is a crying on the shoulder when they reunite.
You're going to have to wait till next week. But that's a
Fair
good
enough.
that question. That's an excellent question. And like, did they really make up, or like what was really happening there? It's a lot to take in, but yeah, hold on to that question. And I hope everybody's doing well. Hope everybody has a wonderful, wonderful Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
Thank you, you too.
Craziness, we do have what to be thankful for, but I don't need Thanksgiving for that. We have every day to be thankful for stuff. So, and that's how we say Modeh Ani, and we say Modeh Manachnu Lach, and we should say that with gusto. But my father, should live and be well, always said, how do you know Thanksgiving is always on a Thursday? Because the Shir Shel Yom, we say, Harchev Picha V'Amalehu. Open your mouths and I will fill it. So that's what we do. So anyway, have a great holiday. Good to see everybody. Take care.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much.
Thank
You
you.
too.